you're kind of walking through a very difficult time. Or it's like walking through a hurricane. It's very easy to get sucked into it. And the challenge is not to get sucked into it, to not ignore it, to not pretend it's not happening, but also not to get pulled into it and not to become afraid. Hello friends, John Dalton here for the Emergence podcast, where we go into love, consciousness, and the mystery. And in this episode we're going into dealing with current events, a question about enlightenment, growing after success, and dealing with fear. So in case I forget, do write to me. I love hearing from you and answering whatever questions you send. Not that I have answers, but I love hearing what I have to say about things. I seem to have something to say about a lot of things. So yeah, do write to me, john@furtheremergence.com. Also, just a little reminder that I send out friendly notes every Sunday. So if you'd like to get a little friendly note from me, I write something most weeks. And yeah, if you want to hear from me like that, send me. There's a way you can do it on the website, furtheremergence.com, or you can add your email list and I'll send you a friendly note every Sunday. So I get a lot of questions that all kind of add up to the same thing, or I've had a lot of questions recently that add up to the same thing, which is this feeling of, what's happening? Or there's a lot of things happening, what are we supposed to do? And that's understandable. And it's that thing of, people have been talking about the quickening and things are changing and it's all gonna, the world is changing, and well, now it's happening. And what to do hasn't changed. It's that thing of being, you're kind of walking through a very difficult time. Or it's like walking through a hurricane. It's very easy to get sucked into it. And the challenge is not to get sucked into it, to not ignore it, to not pretend it's not happening, but also not to get pulled into it and not to become afraid. The main thing is fear and how you manage it. Because if you just bury your head in the sand and go, I'm not afraid, even though you're shaking, well, that's not going to work. So you have to acknowledge it. You have to go, yeah, I want to be afraid. I want to be very afraid. And then it's just that thing of knowing that being very afraid is not the thing. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help you get through. So it's to acknowledge it and just to choose to not be afraid, or to steer yourself away from it with the knowledge that it's not really going to help you, and that it's not going to help you go into the world that you want to go into, which is a world that doesn't have any fear in it. So it's tricky, and it is like walking on quicksand. You have to walk very lightly so you don't get sucked down into it. So it doesn't really matter what happens, and lots of things are happening, and more things will happen because things always happen. So it's not to get pulled into it, not to get sucked down by it. Recognize that it's there, and as Aldous Huxley famously says, walk lightly, be light with it, as light as you can. Be kind to the parts of you that are afraid. They don't know any better, so it's up to you to kind of gently parent them in the direction you want them to go. So that's my broad answer to all those questions. Be as light with it as you can. So I got a question about enlightenment, so I thought I should stand on the enlightenment stone to answer it. This isn't the enlightenment stone, it's just a stone. Anyway, this person says, I'm thinking about having or getting enlightenment. If consciousness doesn't go backwards, that means you can't unenlighten yourself. If you can't, and that means you can't not have it anymore, wouldn't that mean that you actually never had it to begin with? Like it's not something that you can have or get. If so, then what? Is it something that could just be activated or not? Also, I've heard that there could be different types of enlightenment too, or stages. What do you think, John? Do you think you could experience another enlightenment? Well, let me get down off my little soapbox here, and I'll do my best to answer that question. So, I mean, part of it is it comes down to language, really, doesn't it? This idea of getting enlightened, having enlightenment, all that kind of thing. I can only talk about my experience, which was I really wanted it. I didn't think I had it. I found myself a spiritual master. I hung around with him hoping it would rub off on me. It didn't exactly work out like that, but in the presence of another person who was enlightened, I did get enlightened. And all the cliches about it were true. You know, before enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. After enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. That certainly was my experience. Didn't change. It wasn't a gradual thing. The process leading up to it was gradual, but the realization itself was instant. And yeah, I mean, there was an element to it where I went from thinking I didn't have something to knowing that I did. Okay, this ground is a bit soggy, so I'm not gonna sink in quicksand, which kind of bears out what I was saying earlier on about going lightly. So, can you get unenlightened? I haven't. You know, I thought I would. I thought when it happened, I thought, well, this is just another realization. I thought this is just another thing. It will change. It will. I'll forget it, like I do with most other things I've realized, or I'll absorb it. It'll just become part of the inner landscape. That didn't happen, because in the well, it's not 30 years, but what is it? It's 96, so it's coming up on, yeah, it's coming up on 30 years. Yeah, wow, in the 30 years-ish, whatever, since, I've checked in on it many, many times. When I've been in all sorts of different situations of distress. Because that was the other thing that was strange to me about getting enlightened. I thought it would be, you know, I wouldn't be unhappy ever again. But that's not the case. Because for me, it felt like I was a sapling. I've used this analogy before, but it's very good. It felt like I was a sapling who didn't know they were a sapling and thought they should be an oak tree, instead of realizing what they were. And feeling like there was something wrong with me. And then kind of going, oh, I'm a sapling, so I've got growing to do, but I am exactly what I'm supposed to be. And in that, there's no flaw, no error, no nothing. So I continue to grow. I still have unconsciousness. I still have unconsciousness to this day, of course, that I'm continuing to process. So in various times of great distress, when I was, you know, dealing with that, my unconsciousness, I would check in, you know, and in times of intense emotional pain, it was just there, solid as a rock. It didn't stop the pain, but I'd kind of go, am I still enlightened? How could I be enlightened when I feel this terrible? But I still was. The realization didn't waver at all. It's been quite remarkable, you know, because I'm sure like you, things change on the inside. I realize new things. It's always changing, but that never changed. And it hasn't changed. And I still check, of course. I don't check as much as I used to. And initially, God, I was checking all the time. But so it kind of it relates to the second part of the question about, are there stages to it? There hasn't been for me. And I'm pretty sure I won't have another enlightenment experience because I'm not looking for one. Like getting enlightened for me was the end of trying to get enlightened. And recognizing that, yeah, I've got unconsciousness. It continues on. I continue to process it. I think I probably will for the rest of my life because we all seem to be in the same boat. We all seem to be processing the unconsciousness that we've taken on to deal with in our lives. I think that'll continue. But I'm not looking for anything anymore. I was before I got enlightened, I was definitely looking for something. I wanted to get something to assuage this feeling of something wrong with me. I need something to stop me feeling like this. I need something to repair this flaw. So, I would kind of go from one teaching to another, to one spiritual teacher, to another, to one book, to another, and so on. I don't have that anymore. So considering I'm not looking for anything, I'd be surprised if I had another enlightenment kind of thing. But having said that, in the process of turning my unconsciousness into consciousness, which is what we're all doing, I've had great insights. I mean, I'm way more conscious now than I was when I got enlightened, for sure, absolutely. But that's kind of separate. It feels separate to the enlightenment thing for me. And in a way, the enlightenment wasn't really a realization. It was just like a light switch, I went from not knowing to knowing. So the thing I've heard people, it's usually people, as I've said before, I didn't tell anybody about it for a long time, years, like 10 or 11 years. And then it's not like I went around telling everybody. It's just I wrote Maya Noise, and I describe the process in that book. So often, or not often, but the only time I've heard about different stages of enlightenment is when people kind of go, oh, you're only this. They have a name for it, depending on the particular tradition they come through. Like somebody called me Bodhisattva recently. Like, you're not a Buddha, you're a Bodhisattva. And I was like, okay. Didn't mean anything to me. It wasn't like, oh, no, I've got to try and become a Buddha. Didn't have that at all. But most of the disturbance people have about enlightenment and how dare you say you're enlightened. Like another one that somebody left a comment on YouTube was, those who speak don't know, and those who know don't speak. That's a common one as well. Which is like, how is that going to help you get enlightened? I'm not trying to sell you anything. I don't care whether anyone believes me or not, because it's nothing to do with anybody else. It's just between me and me. So, that's an extract from one of the passages, chapter 56, if you're looking for it in the Tao Te Ching, or the Tao of Being. And the other bit to it is, or the bit that goes before it, or further up on the passage, it says, speak and it's mist, or something like that, but be silent and there's confusion. Those two go together, So it's like, words can't really describe it. And even though I talk about enlightenment, I know I'm not really describing it, But this idea of those who know don't speak, it's like, how are you going to get enlightened with that kind of thinking, Because you're like, are they enlightened? Because part of getting enlightened, or what I found very helpful, was being around somebody who I recognized as being enlightened. The living embodiment of it, not some mythical person from the past. Not to discount anybody from the past, but just like, there's a certain amount of something gets eroded in you when you're around somebody and you recognize they've got it. They've got that thing I want. The living embodiment of it. So how are you going to be around somebody? How are you going to do that? How are you going to find them? You're going to have to kind of go, I think they're enlightened. You have to rely on yourself. And like getting enlightened is a very my experience anyway, very self-reliant kind of a thing. So if you can't even, it puts a lot of pressure on yourself to kind of decide, I think this person is enlightened. But I can't ask them, because if I ask them and they say yes, they're not. And if I ask them and they say no, they might not be, but they also might be. Yeah. That's one of the reasons I talk about it, because it's not helpful to be coy about it, I don't think. Anyway, that's just me. So in terms of degrees, it sort of smacks of hierarchy to me. And it smacks of people really talking about what enlightenment means for them. Like people are sending in their responses to what enlightenment means for them for the enlightenment retreat towards the end of the year. And so for some people it's just one word, for other people it's a list. And for each person, it's fine, it's right. And if levitation, for example, is part of their thing, and that they're not enlightened unless they can levitate, that's fine. I don't know why they're coming to a retreat with me, because I can't levitate. But it's very personal to everybody. And rather than just going, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, but you don't have what I want. That's fine. You find someone who does. I think everyone should just go and find the living embodiment of what you think enlightenment is, and just make it your life's purpose to just hang around with that person until you get it. Because being enlightened is great. So let's see, did I answer everything? Degrees, yes. Have it, don't have it. Yes, it is something I had the whole time, and it's almost like I remembered it, or I discovered I had it. It's like, discovering something in your pocket, like, oh, there it is, or my glasses are on the top of my head, or, that kind of thing. It's that. So yes, I did have it all the time, but it seems to be part of the process that you have to look for it, and it seems to be part of the process that we feel like we don't have it, and then we do have it. So that's where the whole getting and having, and I think that kind of language comes in. That's what I think anyway. Now, in response to the question I posted on Instagram, what's the biggest challenge you're facing in your spiritual life? This person said, how to keep going when the going gets good. How to keep growing after success, or let go. So I asked them to clarify a little bit, and they said, earlier this year I had officially overcome some very difficult obstacles. Grew and really leaned into my spiritual side from that. It was incredible. And now that I've overcome some difficult mental and emotional places, I'm reaping the rewards of musical and romantic success in a way. But something's missing. The deeper presence and wisdom I was experiencing and working towards came from a place of overcoming those specific struggles. And now I'm struggling to get back to the wholeness. Just wondering how I go from here, accept and have fun. Find a way to integrate the practices and the experiences I was having. Probably both. Hope that makes some sense. Love your content, by the way. Well, thank you very much. So I think this kind of boils down to a very understandable thing to do with insights, and kind of is similar to what I was talking about, getting enlightened. That well, I suppose generally I could say the feelings that you have around an insight are just that. They're just feelings. And feelings are like the weather. They just come and go. But we kind of think that the feeling is the thing, which is not true, which is not true at all. And you can see it very easily like to do with love, because love is, oh, that's the big feeling, but you know that you can, the feeling of love can go back and forth. If you've got kids, sometimes you really feel like you love them, and other times you feel like you don't. But does that mean that you don't love them? No, not at all. Because love is a knowledge, and it's the same. Realizations are a knowledge. So you can have a realization, and it's a bit like popping the cork on a champagne bottle. when you have a realization, it can be like, oh, what a feeling. I feel so liberated. I feel so, you know, I mean, the idea of enlightenment comes from, I've been in a very dark place and now I'm enlightened, you know. It's like and that's nearly always the way it goes with realizations. We can be in dark places, and then when we have the realization, it's like, so like this person was saying, overcoming very difficult obstacles. And then suddenly you get through them and it's like, wow, this beautiful sense of wholeness. And you have a lot of feelings associated with that. And the thing is, we naturally go, the feeling is the realization, or it's not. Just like love is not really the feeling, the love is a knowledge. You know, your partner might drive you insane, and you might have very unpleasant feelings towards them. Yet you could be asked, do you love them? You know, yeah. What about your kids? Do you love them? Yes. Like, you just know who you love. And then the feelings come and go. And it's kind of the same with the realizations. You can have a realization and have the big feelings. And you can be sure that the feelings will go. The realization generally doesn't. What can happen with realizations is we can absorb it. Or we generally do. We absorb it and it becomes part of us. And, you know, it's like, it's almost, and I do this regularly, it's like, what was that brilliant thing I realized last month? It was great, you know. It might be slightly different for me because of my one-to-one work, because I get to talk a lot about this kind of thing. So I often hear myself talking about insights. And as I'm doing that, I'm going, oh yeah, that's right, I had that thing. Because whatever the difficulty the person is going through or whatever's come up in the session, it's like the realization, it's almost like I retrieve it to illustrate or to help in some way. But often as I'm doing that, I'm going, oh yeah, that's right, I'd forgotten about that one, you know. And at the time, it was like, oh my God, it's such a fantastic realization, you know. I'm never going to forget this. But we do, of course, you know. So there's that. The other thing is, it's very easy to feel like we have to hang on to everything. And we have to be accountable for all our realizations, you know. And that once we discover something, we can't ever forget it, you know. But like, that's not the way it goes. And I always think of, like, I'm walking on the beach here. You know, I've walked on this beach many times. And where I'm standing right now, you know, when the tide is in, the water would be well over my head. And that's kind of the way it is with knowledge, you know. It comes, and then we know, and it's all very clear, and then we get covered over, and we get lost again, you know. The knowledge, the insight, acts like a kind of a heat on the ice of our unconsciousness. So our unconsciousness rolls back in, covers us over, but the insight is in there underneath. Our consciousness is under there, melting it away. So getting lost and getting found, it's like breathing, you know. You breathe in, you breathe out. When you breathe out, you're like, where's the air gone? You never do that. You just know it's going to come back in again, you know. And it's kind of the same. Like when we get lost, we have this feeling of like, oh my God, I was so clear last month. I was so on top of this stuff. And now I'm confused, I'm lost, I haven't a clue. This happens to me regularly. Now I'm used to it, and I know what's happening. So you just kind of go, okay, the tide's come back in, or I'm just going through a confused stage, and you know, I don't hang on to that. I also don't hang on to when I'm super clear. I don't go, that's it now, I've got it figured out. I mean, generally speaking, if you feel like you've got anything figured out, yeah, you probably don't. It's not good to be certain about anything, I think, I've found, because life has got a great sense of humor, and will generally demonstrate to you that you don't have it figured out, or that there's more, probably a better way of saying that. There's more. There's always more. So, yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned. Don't try and get back to the wholeness. Just kind of know the wholeness is there. It's under there. It's under there, and it will resurface as it's needed. There'll be new insights to have. Don't get addicted to the suffering. Very easy to sort of feel like, oh, the suffering led to the insight. It didn't. I can guarantee you it didn't. There's no merit in suffering at all. What happens is you suffer, and you suffer, and you suffer, and eventually it makes you break. It breaks something in you. And it's in the break, you collapse, you're on your knees, you're like, why, or that kind of thing, that kind of Hollywood thing. You break, and then there's a gap, because you've just given up. You've given up trying. You've given up everything. And then in that stillness, that's when the insight comes. And then we look back along that, and we miss the gap, and go, oh, it was the suffering led to the insight. No, it didn't. The suffering led to you giving up and letting go. So just let go. Let go now and go into the stillness. That's why I'm such a big advocate of meditation, the sort of meditation I do. Because it's the cultivation of that gap, So, yeah, don't get attached to the suffering. Don't kind of go, oh, I obviously need big obstacles or I don't get insights. No, you don't. That's not true. Just go into the stillness, go into the not thinking, go into the mystery, and they'll be there. And yeah, don't hang on to anything that you get, because it will pass. Everything passes. And to be okay with that, and to be kind with yourself, and to not, to take yourself where you are. And if you're not feeling it, that's okay. It's just a feeling. Even if you were feeling it, it would still pass. All right, I hope that helps. Now, just one meme this week from the Further Emergence Instagram feed. This one says, "The goodness inside you is stronger than what you fear." The goodness inside you is stronger than what you fear. That's lovely, isn't it? Is it true? Is it true in your experience? Well, in my experience, it is. But I think it's a bit to do with timing. Like, if you try and remember this when you're covered by what you fear, it's probably not going to help. It's probably going to make it worse. You get into a big fight with yourself about it. Because when you're covered by fear, it can be very difficult to remember truths. And this is a truth, but it's a truth that is best explored when you're not covered with fear, which is not an easy thing to do, because there are a lot of things going around at the moment that encourage us to be very afraid. So that's why I encourage meditation, because meditation is sort of where you can reflect on this when you're not covered in fear. Because what happens is, well, number one, you have to know there's goodness inside you. We're not really conditioned to know that. We're conditioned to, at best, think we're mostly good, or we've got mostly good inside, or, at worst, that we have no good inside. I've worked with lots of people who just thought they were just flat out bad. So knowing that there's good inside you, that's tricky. That's tricky to get there, to get to that knowledge. It's not like it just pops out. You have to kind of let it come. And it starts with this, like things like this idea, the goodness inside you is stronger than what you fear. Like when you begin to kind of have a think about that and go, well, is that true? What is this goodness inside of which you speak? Then when you're meditating, if you meditate the way I do, and you're just going into the mystery. Because when you go into the mystery, you're kind of going where the goodness inside you is, really. Because if you think about fear, right? Fear, it's very high frequency, very tremulous kind of energy, very, vibrates very fast. Just think about your nervous system when you're covered in fear. And then when you think about goodness, or when you think about the mystery, or when you think about deep dreamless sleep, because it's kind of all the same thing. When you go into deep dreamless sleep, after you've got through your scary dreams, because if you're afraid, you're probably going to have scary dreams. But there'll be a point when you just drop out the bottom into deep dreamless sleep. There's no fear there. But the mystery is there, because that's what you go into when you go into deep dreamless sleep. You go right into the mystery. And I would say that's where the goodness is. So when you meditate, and you meditate with the focus on the mystery, you're kind of going into that goodness consciously. It's not like your mind is involved and you're like, I must find this goodness inside me so I can combat the fear. It's not really how it works. It's more a case of you're kind of putting yourself in the vicinity of the goodness inside you. And slowly it kind of dawns on you. And what it does is when the fear comes, and the fear wants to take over, it's a bit easier to see it. You're a bit to the side of it. You can kind of go, I know this, I know the mystery, and I know this fear, and I can see it. And because I can see it, it's not me. I know it's not me because I'm looking at it. And that changes things. But as I say, don't try and Pollyanna yourself out of fear of like, oh, the goodness inside me is stronger than this. That's not going to work at all. But you can prepare the ground for it by becoming familiar with the mystery, becoming familiar with who you are, and that helps. It helps in the difficult times when the fear is there. Denying you're afraid doesn't work, I don't think. It hasn't worked for me anyway. Whereas acknowledging it and then kind of through having your consciousness speed up a bit through meditation, you can get a bit to the side of it. You can kind of see it for what it is. You can go, yeah, I can see that fear, but I can see it coming. And then when you're quiet, when you're not covered in fear, you can allow this idea of that the fear, that the goodness inside you is stronger than what you fear. And that helps. All right, that's all I have for you this time. I trust you're well. I trust you're of good cheer. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.